Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 8th virtual meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity. This is our committee's first public hearing to determine whether there is discrimination faced by persons with mental illnesses and with a specific focus on their ability to access quality mental health care. I want to remind all participants that this is a virtual meeting, and therefore we are asking you to mute your microphone when you are not speaking to help keep background noise to a minimum, and adjust your camera so that your face is fully visible, and ensure that notifications from your cell phones are not disturbing this meeting, so they should be muted. Members of our listening and viewing audience, you are invited to post or send your comments via the Parliament's various social media platforms, Facebook page, ParlView, the Parliament's YouTube channel, and Twitter. I would like to, at this time, introduce myself. My name is Dr. Mian Gaspardori, chairman of this committee, and I'd like to ask the members of this committee to now introduce themselves, starting with our vice chairman, Minister Lisa Morris-Julian.
Lisa Morris-Julian, Vice Chair and Member.
Esmond Ford, Member of the committee. Good morning to all and welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning, Kazim Hussein, Member.
Good morning, Jillian John, Member.
Good morning, Hazel Thompson Ahi, Member.
Good morning, Anita Haynes, Member.
I think that's it for our members of the committee who are present here this morning. At this time, I would like to invite the officials from the Ministry of Health to introduce themselves to the rest of the hearing. Starting with the PS.
Hello, good morning. I am Melanie Noel, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Health.
Good morning. I am Dr. Hazel Othello, Director of Mental Health at the Ministry of Health.
Good morning. I am Keisha Lewis. I'm the Manager of Mental Health Services for the Northwest region.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Samir Shafi, Medical Director, Sundance Hospital.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Ramana Vedula, Primary Care Physician 2, Eastern Regional Health Authority.
Do we have any other members? Yes.
Hi, good morning. I'm Chairman. I'm Dr. Pravin Ramuta, Director of Health of the Southwest Regional Health Authority.
And good morning. I'm Professor Gerard Hutchinson, and I'm Head of the Mental Health Services at the North Central Regional Health Authority.
Is there anyone else in the Ministry of Health? If no one else, I want to thank all members and all officials from the Ministry of Health for joining us today. A civilization is measured by how it treats its weakest members, or put differently, the greatness of a nation can be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable. It is globally acknowledged by the UN that if one has a mental health problem, one should be treated with dignity and respect by staff and service providers. The right to adequate treatment is also included in the rights which should be afforded to every citizen. In 2013, the WHO recognized mental health as a global health priority. It is therefore appropriate that this Joint Select Committee examines the treatment afforded our fellow citizens who have mental health challenges with a view to establishing our objectives. The state's capacity to provide quality mental health care to persons with mental illness in Trinidad and Tobago, and to examine whether discrimination is faced by persons with mental illnesses in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of access to quality health care. At this time, I'd like to remind members to direct your questions through the chair. And I would like, before we go to questioning, to ask Ms. Noel, the Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health, to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Joint Select Committee, fellow colleagues of the Ministry of Health, and the viewing public. I take this opportunity to reaffirm the commitment of the Ministry of Health to the provision of mental health services across our country. Our ministry continuously provides technical guidance and support as it relates to the management of mental health services across our network of public health institutions through our mental health units. We recognize that there are challenges and shortcomings being experienced and are taking steps to advance provision of mental health services using a behavioral change model approach. The Ministry of Health, through its approved 2019 to 2029 National Mental Health Policy, seeks to ensure that mental health is addressed throughout the life course of an individual using a public health approach. Mental illness does not discriminate and can impact all members of the community. In this regard, our primary objective is to work towards realizing full integration of services into primary and secondary healthcare, and we are committed to increasing access to mental health services throughout Trinidad and Tobago. This policy initiative takes cognizance of the broad range of social problems that are linked to mental health, such as childhood maltreatment, domestic violence, abuse, substance misuse, workplace stress, discrimination, unemployment, and poverty. Consequently, it seeks to promote collaboration amongst all relevant sectors that will result in improved programs for members of our diverse population, needing such services to build resilience, achieve faster recovery, be reintegrated into society, and to continue to live productive and healthy lives. And so it is envisaged that today's proceedings will be insightful towards promoting the treatment and care of mental health care services towards better healthcare outcomes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health. So a reminder again, as we begin the questioning, that you direct your questions through the chair, and also remember to activate your microphones when you are speaking, and when you are complete, please turn them off so that we don't have too much feedback and disruption of our proceedings. At this time, I would like to direct a question to the Ministry of Health officials. And this one, I'm not sure which person would take this one, PS, it may be you. But I'd like to just, based on your submission, you did outline some conventions that Trinidad and Tobago are signatory to, which deal with mental health and the treatment of mental health, persons with mental health challenges and their rights. Can you just outline, for the benefit of those who are listening and viewing, those conventions which deal with mental health and the treatment of persons with mental health?
Thank you very much for the question, Madam Chair. We know that the Ministry of Health is signatory to several conventions that that we have been signatory to. We are guided by our Mental Health Act as well as the RHA Act. And there are also some conventions that are from the WHO and PAHO. And I would invite Dr. Othello to give a more comprehensive response with regard to this.
Dr. Othello? You have to unmute, sorry.
Good morning. The delivery arm of the mental health services lies within the regional health authorities through their mental health services. The ministry provides the technical and policy guidelines that help guide that process. From the perspective of the ministry, we are guided by all documents, all of these documents that the government is signatory to. The one that is most relevant to mental health is the one that speaks to the human rights of persons with mental health disorders. And we ensure that our clinical guidelines, our operational policies, our treatment methods are all in alignment with that document. In addition, the Mental Health Act of Trinidad and Tobago also reflects the values that that document espouses.
Thank you so much. So we have quite a few, and I know that there is the 1991 Convention or Resolution of the General Assembly that was adopted. That's the UN Principles for the Protection of Persons with Mental Illnesses and the Improvement of Mental Health Care. So I would imagine that that is a key one that plays a role in policy formation. And so let's move to the National Mental Health Policy 2019 to 2029. And if I may ask, are there any international benchmarks that this policy was tied to or was modeled after?
In the creation of the policy, best practices were looked at globally so that we were very cognizant of what was happening in other regions in terms of mental health care. That guidance allowed us to be mindful of the fact that a decentralized approach to mental health care is currently believed to be the best approach, and it's the approach that most countries are pursuing. In that regard, that policy document is very heavily weighted in the direction of decentralization, and we are currently moving towards the implementation phase of that policy, which will allow us to provide more services to persons with mental health disorders closer to where they live and reduce the reliance on hospital-based care.
Is there any body that does external evaluation of healthcare provisions in terms of mental health care?
Well, all the policies that we are developing and all the practices that we recommend, we work in close collaboration with the Pan American Health Organization, and we seek their guidance and their direction and advice whenever we are doing new things, so that we are always mindful of their advice, and that helps us to ensure that what we are doing is in fact in alignment with what is deemed acceptable at a global level.
Mm-hmm. Is there, so I get that, but is there any type of evaluation that is done? Is that a feature of best practice in mental health care?
Audits are done at the hospitals from time to time. We audit the wards in terms of their clinical practices. We audit the clinics periodically, and that allows us to evaluate what is happening, how services are provided, how clinical records are kept, how documentation takes place, and that allows the facilities or the institutions to have a good idea of where they're at and where improvements are required.
And who does these audits?
At the level of the Regional Health Authority, they have audit departments, and perhaps I don't know if Ms. Lois would want to speak to the issue of the audit department at the Northwest RHE, but I'm aware that they have audit departments who are responsible for all the auditing within the RHE.
Madam Chair, I just had a follow-up question.
Before you even, I just want to get to the person Dr. Othello would have identified to just hear a little bit more about the auditing, and I'll come right to you.
No problem.
Yes, good morning. So,
yes.
Yeah, auditing and evaluation of services is currently facilitated through the quality department. We have a quality department based at Sundance Hospital who is responsible for monitoring services, inpatient services as well as outpatient services. So an example of a recent audit they did was the waiting time at the admission department, in terms of time presented as opposed to time assessed by a medical officer. Those are the types of things. And we also have service user feedback questionnaires.
So these are all internal audits?
Those are internal audits.
Is there any practice of external auditing being done that you have seen around the region or international? Is there any country that does external audits? Is there any body that does external audits for any country? Have you seen that as a feature of mental health care?
There are countries that do external auditing. We have not done any external auditing.
And do you think that that would be something that would be useful and helpful in terms of gauging where we are internationally as we consider whether we are meeting the needs of the conventions that we are signatory to, whether we are meeting those requirements and so on? Do you think that external auditing may be time for us to look at some level of external auditing for our mental health care?
I think it certainly would be beneficial, yes.
All right. Ms. Haynes, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm glad, Ms. Lewis, in your answer, you touched something that I was going to ask, which is this idea of quality and whether or not you're getting feedback from patients and persons who are accessing the healthcare. And so you did mention that there's a customer feedback and so that you are getting that. But from that, I don't know if you would be able to give us a sense. I know you're assessing waiting times and whatnot, but can we get a sense as a committee overall what the sentiment is from persons who are accessing the healthcare services and do they feel adequately safe from the audits that you may have had access to thus far?
From the audits, yes, they do. So there are two categories of persons that are engaged. One is relatives and carers, and one is the patients themselves, those who are stable enough to engage in that process. Yes, there are some feedback that, for example, the length of time it takes for prescription renewal. Some of the recent feedback was patients would, in the community outpatient setting, would like to see a bit more emphasis placed on their physical care. For example, monitoring of blood pressure, those sorts of things in the clinic. Yeah, those are some of the things.
Thank you very much.
Any other member wants to come in at this point in time? I see your hand is raised, Member Ford.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, welcome to the officials of the Ministry of Health. We are talking about the auditing factor, all right? And once the auditing factor is being done efficiently and timely, from these reports, we should be able to identify scenarios. We should be able to identify whether these services are being done on a proper basis. I would like to go to page 9 of the report submitted, right, where it is stated that the WHO AIMS report 2018 to 2019 also highlighted that, and I quote, there continues to be a poor collection of data regarding diagnosis, use of restraints, and the number of involuntary admissions. Facilities produce internal reports, but there is a need for official national reporting on mental health, right? And as I said, page 9, and those were the findings of the WHO AIMS report 2018 to 2019. And my question is, based on the comment by WHO, has the ministry undertaken to provide a national report on mental health, which we are discussing today? Again, Madam Pierce, over to you through the chairman, and well, whoever could give us some feedback on that, please.
Thank you, member. I will ask Dr. Othello to respond to that question, please.
Thank you for that question. And the answer is yes. We are, in fact, even before the WHO AIMS report, we had already identified that need, and we had already begun to work on it. So we are currently in the process of setting up a national mental health information system, which would allow the services that actually provide mental health care in the communities across Trinidad and Tobago to input their data into a computer system at that point of care and allow us at the Ministry of Health in the mental health unit to receive that data directly. That would allow us to get feedback on a wide range of indicators that we've identified and to be able to report on those indicators in a timely manner whenever that information is required of us. So we are actively working to correct that.
Okay, Madam Chair, a follow-up, please. Again, through you, probably to Dr. Otello again. What percentage of admissions of these mental patients are basically involuntary? Are we able to identify it, or it's only when persons are considered, based on their illness? What percentage of it is involuntary coming to the various institutions?
I don't have an accurate percentage for you on that at this point in time. That can be provided subsequently, but the decision as to whether somebody is admitted voluntarily or involuntarily is made at the point where the person presents to the service by a clinician who evaluates the person's current mental state, as well as their competence, because somebody may be willing to sign a voluntary admission form, but if their symptoms are such that they're not competent to sign that form at that point, then a relative or someone may have to sign on behalf of them, or in some circumstances, they may have to be admitted involuntarily. So it's a patient-by-patient decision that is made based on clinical findings, and statistics on that can be provided subsequently.
Madam Chair, last question, please. Again, what are the factors used to determine which persons receive inpatient as opposed to outpatient treatment services? Right? How do we determine outpatient versus inpatient?
The majority of patients are treated in outpatient settings. Inpatient care is reserved for when persons' symptoms are at such a level of severity that adequate care cannot be provided for them in the community. In some cases, inpatient care is also provided to provide relatives with a bit of respite, because sometimes a person's caregivers may be a little bit overwhelmed from the process of providing that care and may need some respite. So sometimes we do admit patients for varying periods of time in order to provide the relatives with that. But the majority of the patients who are inpatients are there because of the severity of their symptoms and because of the need for inpatient care, so that they can have round-the-clock nursing supervision and care, and so that medication compliance can be monitored and they can receive additional counseling on the importance of continuing their medication compliance when they are discharged back into the community. The whole aim of the decentralization process is to provide as many people as possible with outpatient care and to reduce the need for admission to hospital.
And all what you are saying are available at basically all the centers throughout Trinidad and Tobago, East, West, North, South Tobago are available?
As indicated in our response, in the north, the Sundance Hospital provides care, psychiatric care, inpatient care. In the North Central region, we have the psychiatric ward at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex. In the south, we have the San Fernando General Hospital Psychiatric Ward, in addition to which the new Point Fortin Hospital was built with a psychiatric ward, and the new Arima Hospital was built with a psychiatric ward. In Tobago, the psychiatric hospital also has a psychiatric ward. And the new central block that is being built at Port of Spain Hospital will also have a psychiatric ward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I may, just to follow up on a point that Member Ford raised, the WHO report was in 2018-19, and Dr. Othello, if I'm not mistaken, you said even before the completion of that report, the Ministry of Health would have started work on getting that National Mental Health Information System up. So that's 2018-19, we're in 2021. Could you let us know what is the targeted completion date for that system, that platform, to be available for use?
I'm not able to provide that at this point in time. I don't have that information in front of me.
Maybe the PS can assist us in this regard?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to provide that information. We can subsequently give it to you in writing.
That would be appreciated because it directly impacts exactly what the issues are, and getting that system up, as you would explain, would be very important. Minister Maurice Julian, and then we have Senator Thompson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, Dr. Othello, the submission by the Ministry of Health indicated that for the period 2016 to 2021, 7,425 persons were assessed and diagnosed with a mental health disorder. Can you please, I have several follow-ups. What are the major categories of mental illness identified? Could you also let us know how many persons received routine outpatient treatment? And then can you tell me what was the age range which had the highest number of persons diagnosed with a mental illness for males and females, respectively?
Okay, the vast majority of persons who access our services are treated for depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, and psychotic disorders. So that's what we see on a day-to-day basis in the outpatient clinics. Usually when they're at the clinics, they're not severely ill, and they're able to continue with their outpatient care, stay at home, and attend the clinics periodically for these conditions. We also have some substance-induced disorders, as you would imagine, and a lot of that care is also provided on an outpatient basis. I think your question had several components. The first was the major categories. I think you mentioned the age range of patients.
Yes,
go
ahead.
Sorry. Yes, care is provided for the entire life course as needed, so that we have the child guidance clinics that provides outpatient care to children. Those are located in San Fernando and in Tobago, as well as the Calm Clinic at Mount Hope.
Dr. Othello, please, through the Chair, how many persons received the routine outpatient treatments?
Okay, I would have to go back to the submission for that. I think the data that we were provided for, we provided the data by RHA. We did not provide totals in terms of the total numbers of persons. So I don't have that in front of me at this point,
okay,
but that can be provided.
I would like to request that. And I would also like you, with regards to Member Ford, they spoke about the different wards and the RHAs and Eric Williams, Arima, etc. Can you tell us how the services differ between those received at the mental health wards as compared to the services received at the St. Anne's Psychiatric Hospital? Who goes where? What determines what?
Where people go is largely a function of geography. The aim is to treat everybody as close as possible to where they live. So persons who live in the south are generally treated at San Fernando General Hospital, people who live in Tobago, etc. So it's largely a matter of geography. However, from time to time, St. Anne's Hospital receives patients from across Trinidad and Tobago.
So there's no difference in treatments?
No, the principles of clinical care are the same across the board. It's a multidisciplinary approach whereby we have psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, mental health nurses, and so on. And our diagnostic process follows the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders or the International Classification of Diseases. We use the same criteria for diagnosing, and we use the same medications across the board.
We noticed that the general trend in the data showed that there were more male patients at the public healthcare facilities. Could you tell the committee what factors may account for the higher number of male patients?
A number of factors contribute to that. One is that women are sometimes more willing to access outpatient care voluntarily so that their illnesses get treated earlier in the course of the illness, reducing the likelihood of the illness progressing to a severe enough state for them to need to be admitted. Other issues include outpatient compliance after discharge, the extent to which you're compliant with medication and with clinic visits afterwards contributes to the likelihood of a relapse. And if the relapse is severe enough, the likelihood of readmission. And we also have other factors such as substance abuse that contributes to mental illness, in which we have a higher prevalence among males than among females.
Because of that particular trend, what measures can you state that the ministry implemented to address these factors?
To address the higher prevalence of admission among men?
Yes.
At the level of the RHAs, the mental health officers who are trained psychiatric community psychiatric nurses, they visit patients in the community and follow them up when patients do not keep their appointments, so that they have the ability during those visits to encourage persons to share information with them, to educate them and so on the importance of their follow-up care, and in an attempt to reduce the likelihood of a relapse and of readmission.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Otello. Madam Chair.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just before Senator Thompson and he comes in, I'd like to ask a quick follow-up question about the clinical principles which Dr. Otello followed across all of the institutions that treat our patients with mental health care. And that question really deals with how up-to-date are our treatment and those principles, those clinical principles, are those updated regularly based on best practice internationally and so on? And who determines what those clinical principles are? And are we up to date?
Okay, the answer to that lies in training. We have in Trinidad and Tobago a postgraduate program in psychiatry. So many of our doctors come through the University of the West Indies and receive state-of-the-art training in postgraduate psychiatry. So they come into the service as senior doctors, well-trained. Part of their training exposes them to international literature, and continuing medical training is encouraged, so that prior to the COVID situation, we had ongoing what we call CME, continuing medical education sessions at meetings that would be hosted by the Association of Psychiatrists of Trinidad and Tobago. And at those meetings, we would discuss important topics and updates in psychiatry, in addition to which the association also used to host an annual conference at which we would have both local and international speakers, again providing updates in psychiatry. And I don't know if that answers your question adequately.
So therefore, we can be assured as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that our clinical principles, the treatment of our mental health patients, are in line with what would happen internationally, regionally as best practice. Yes?
To the best of our ability to provide it, yes, that is our guiding principle.
Okay. All right. Senator Thompson-Ahi. still muted, Senator.
Madam Chair, can I go in the interim if Senator?
No, we actually have
you have a line.
Mr. Kazim Hossain after.
No problem.
So let's take Minister Hossain, and we'll take Senator Thompson here after when she sorts out her issue. Right? So, Mr. Hossain, and I will take you after.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and thanks to my good friend for giving me. Chairman, I just have a couple questions that is kind of bothering me. I heard the doctor mention just now about some main areas where these hospitals are, like in Port of Spain, San Fernando, Tobago. I would like to know, would the ministry take measures to ensure that their services are provided to persons who reside in rural areas and other settlements that are not easily accessible to the regional health authorities? For example, transportation may be a possible issue that may arise in this area in particular for mental health illness. The other question is, given that many socially displaced persons suffer from mental illness, what approaches will be utilized to provide health care for these people? And the last one I have is, I'll come back to you, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much. I wrote it down here. I'll start with it. Thank you.
So, Senator Hossain, can you just repeat your first question? You have to unmute again. Okay.
Right. In rural areas, for example, and other settlements, which is not accessible, like in Port of Spain, San Fernando, and Tobago, and so on. I don't know what they could say, what the Ministry of Health could say, could make this easier accessible for the people who live in the rural communities.
Okay. Not sure who wants to take that from Ministry of Health. Yes, maybe you can tell us.
This is part of our decentralization thrust, which is a central part of our national mental health policy. Dr. Othello will be able to give some further information on that.
Certainly. Decentralization of mental health services is in progress, as I spoke before. And the whole idea of community-based psychiatry is not a novel concept. Trinidad and Tobago has been providing psychiatric care in communities for quite some time. In that regard, we have clinics across the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago where patients can get care close to where they live. What we are doing now is expanding upon that, building upon that, and diversifying the services that can be accessed in those clinics. But those clinics, to a large extent, currently exist. So, for instance, we have clinics in the east in Toco, Sandy Grande, Miaro. We have clinics in Point Fortin, in Rio Claro. We have clinics across Trinidad and Tobago, and as the decentralization process continues, we would be in a better position to identify whether additional areas need that kind of service. What has been happening in the interim is that the RHAs that provide those services have what they call outreach clinics in areas where they do not have a full-scale clinic. So they have smaller outreach clinics in some of the more far-flung areas. In addition to which, as I mentioned before, we have mental health officers who are trained psychiatric nurses whose responsibility it is to do home visits when necessary. And there's nowhere in Trinidad and Tobago that's outside of their reach in terms of distance.
Thank you. Minister Hossain, is there a second question I think you raised? You want to just remind the Ministry of Health officials at this time?
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and through you, Madam Chairman. Given that parents are the primary caregivers to children who suffer from mental illness, will regional clinics or other appropriate bodies offer training services to parents so they'll become more adept at dealing with these children's needs? I don't know if it's in place, but I would like to know. Thank you very much, Chairman.
So the training of parents to deal with children with mental illness, Dr. Othello?
Yeah, taking care of children is holistic. If you are, I will probably ask Professor Hutchinson to expand after I finish, since they have the CALM clinic in the North Central RHA. But as a general rule, you can't provide mental health care for children without involving the parents. So the parents are always an integral part of that process. I'll hand over to Professor Hutchinson if you may want to expand further.
Yes, hi, good morning again. So as Dr. Othello has mentioned, treating children invariably incorporates some degree of treatment of the parents and the parental relationship that exists both between the parents and with the children. So in terms of the individual provision of treatment to children, parental interaction is inevitable dimension of that process. From a more general sense, in terms of parent training, the various clinics work in conjunction with student support services at the Ministry of Education. And when particular issues are identified in particular areas or in particular circumstances, sessions are set up either through school PTAs or directly through the Student Support Services division to provide additional inputs in terms of training for parents in the management of the mental health problems of their children.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. We are going now to Senator Thompson-Ahi.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do apologize. My finger was too anxious and I pressed the wrong button. Now, I was very pleased to hear Dr. Othello at the start of the session speak of the fact that the ministry was guided by my words are the international instruments or the conventions which should govern their operations. I want to ask her specifically if the Ministry of Health, and especially the department, if they've received the members of the department, especially the heads, have received training in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. If they are really, very familiar with articles, particularly 24, which is the right of the child to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health, particularly also Article 25, which deals with the periodic review of placement, because over the years we've heard about children who are in institutions, and of course, parents who cannot cope want them to remain there, so that the periodic review of placement is not as it should be. And also Article 39, rehabilitative care. In addition, there are other UN documents that we should be looking at, which the Committee on the Rights of the Child in their concluding report on Trinidad and Tobago have said we should be acting in conformity, even though it's not something that we've ratified. The JDL rules, the United Nations rules for the protection of juveniles deprived of their liberty. So with Article 25 and the JDL rules, you're looking at periodic review of placement and also the limitation of the physical restraint and use of force. There have been cases in Trinidad and Tobago where the courts have pronounced on children who have been restrained. And the rule is that if you have children who are restrained or you need to restrain, that the people who are running the institution should consult with medical and other relevant personnel and guide them in the use of restraint, because some of these uses can, and in fact have resulted in injury to the child. So have bodies like the Children's Authority that run institutions, and people who run institutions been consulting with you, as they should, with regard to the use of force, the use of restraint, which to all intents and purposes from the reports are used sometimes indiscriminately. Quite a mouthful, I'm sure, but if you can just respond to some of my concerns, that'd be great.
I was just jumping in to make sure we had the two issues that I think the main things, which are the training in international conventions and instruments, whether that is something that is highlighted. And also, I think you pulled out of those things the use of restraints on children, and whether the Ministry of Health provides guidance and to institutions that deal with issues where that matter arise. Yeah?
Excellent.
Okay. So, Dr. Othello?
Okay. At the Ministry of Health, I can't remember any specific training on those instruments, but I can tell you that when we are doing research for various purposes, we do look to see what guidance we can find from documents of that nature. I can't recall to be a specific training exercise. Okay. With respect to the issue of restraints on children, as a general rule, that is not our goal or our purpose or intention in terms of the care of children. There aren't many situations in which, to my knowledge, restraints are used widely in children. I'm not aware of that as a frequently occurring phenomenon. The places where children are treated, for instance, right now, the Children's Evaluation and Treatment Unit at the Sundance Hospital does not use restraints. So I am not aware of that being an ongoing problem. There may have been isolated incidents, but I am not aware of that being an ongoing or persistent or common problem. It certainly would be something that would cause us concern, because we are aware that it is not the best practice. In that regard, we firmly believe in treating everyone in the least restrictive environment. That has long been our mantra, so that the least restrictive environment a person can be treated in, be it adult or child, is the environment that we prefer to treat them in. That's why in days gone by, we had more open wards at Sundance Hospital. Unfortunately, we've had to surrender some of them for other purposes. For instance, where the Children's Evaluation and Treatment Unit is now, used to be one of our most open wards where, it was only locked at night when people were going to bed. We still have Keisha could bear me out on that, Ms. Lewis, in terms of which wards are still open. But if you visit Sundance Hospital, you would see patients walking around the compound, and the patients who are well enough to do so are allowed to leave the ward, to walk around, and to come back to the ward for meal time and ward activities and things like that. So that the use of restraints is really a last option, and it's not a preferred option for children. In addition to which, the hospitals have restraints policies. So if they're using restraints, it's supposed to be done in accordance with the restraints policy.
Well, the cases that we've heard about are generally from the children's homes, complaints and so on. Some of them have reached the courts. But what I'm saying is that they're supposed to confer with you all, because you are the experts. So it means that they're using those restraints because they want to prevent the children maybe from self-harm or harming others, without recourse to you as the experts to guide them in the process. And that's why we're having problems.
If I may, and let me come in here to just broaden the point that I think Senator Thompson he is making, and it's a question I myself wanted to ask. in terms of regulation, because we have heard Senator Thompson, he is referring to cases that she has heard of that may have reached the courts. A couple of years ago, we saw a situation where there were mentally ill persons in cages, and when the whole thing was established and it was uncovered, the family members in some cases had brought them there for treatment and so maybe I could broaden that question to ask, what is the role of the Ministry of Health in regulating and providing guidance to not just the state institutions, but also private institutions that offer care to mentally ill persons? Where does the Ministry of Health come in? Is there a regulatory role? What is in place in terms of human resource to provide that guidance, to provide that regulation? What exactly is happening in that regard?
Okay, the Ministry of Health has developed what we call approved homes guidelines for the provision of care to persons with mental health disorders in homes that are approved. And we're in the process of completing the regulations that will go with those guidelines. Those guidelines are being communicated so that people contact us from time to time, even though it's not fully rolled out as yet. And people contact us from time to time and we advise them to ensure that the homes that they're setting up are in conformity. The process also puts in place a mechanism for periodic visits so that those homes can be examined to see whether or not they're in conformity with the guidelines, and a process for what should happen if they're not in conformity. So right now, because we haven't fully rolled it out yet, we are working informally with the homes to help them to get in conformity so that when it is fully implemented, they can continue to provide care, knowing that the care that they're providing is of the standard that is acceptable.
And that includes the homes run by the state?
When you say the homes run by
the children,
yes.
I'm specifically not referencing Senator Thompson.
Sorry about that. From our perspective, yes, the homes run from the state must certainly be in compliance with those regulations.
Senator Thompson, is there anything else you wanted to address at this time?
Question, so I'll be finished with, yes. I have a concern about the statistics, and especially suicides. And I ask this in the context of how do you classify something as a suicide when you haven't really gathered all of the evidence. And having gathered all of the evidence where you have classified a death as a suicide, do you then go back when you realize that in fact this was an accident, which was an apparent suicide involving a child, and say, well, this is not as it seemed? Or is it that it remains in your statistics as suicide? Because suicides, as you would, I'm sure, be aware, aren't always suicides. Husbands poison wives and wives poison husbands, and they do all sorts of things. And children involved in play may also end up in a situation which is an apparent suicide. So are you convinced that the statistics that you put forward here as suicide are in fact cases that have been thoroughly investigated and you can say, well, they are in fact suicides? Or does it remain so? I don't want to be specific, but you may know what I'm speaking about.
I'm not sure if I know what you're speaking about, but that's an interesting question. At the Ministry of Health, we do not investigate suicides. We receive reports. We receive reports from Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that, or from the regional health authorities but we do not do the investigating that would determine if something that was looking like a suicide at one point turned out to be a homicide or an accident. So we have to accept the report, the statistics that are provided to us.
So any wrong information will be the fault of the police?
Well, we have to work with what we provide.
Yes, I quite understand. I'm very glad I asked that question. So I realized it was the wrong entity. Thank you.
All right, we have Member Ford and then Member Morris Julian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, it seems like Dr. Otello is in the hot seat for most of the questions. I know we spoke about training, right? You talk about the training for the doctors, the nurses, medical personnel, psychiatric nurses, parents, and even also children in certain instances. But with regards to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, I know they play a role. I'm not sure if it's how critical it is in this whole mental care situation, because remember, we have individuals that are on the streets. And in your submission, again, identified again on pages 5 and 6, right? You spoke about the development of a pilot program to provide mental health training for police officers, right? My question is, what is the proposed timeline for the rollout of this program, and also the length of the program? And if you could just share, briefly, what the training will entail, because we have some instances whereby some people may consider that police may abuse, in inverted commas, their situations when they're dealing with a mental case patient. So could you shed some light on that first, please, with regard to the whole training?
Okay, the training that is provided for the police officers, first begin with respect to a timeline. Unfortunately, I can't give you that at this point in time because the pilot project was rolled out. The curriculum has to be accredited, and we're waiting for that to happen, so that once the curriculum is accredited, it can be rolled out to the in a more holistic manner. However, with respect to the actual curriculum, what we do is we provide information on general aspects of mental health that they should be aware of. We provide specific training in the area of control and restraint, what we call prevention and management of aggression and violence. That's a particular program that we engaged in several years ago and continue to deliver to various stakeholders, including the police. And by doing so, we teach them to de-escalate situations, so that instead of taking, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but, learning how to use tone and mannerisms and so on in a way that gets the person's confidence and gets the person to more than likely comply in a safe manner, reducing the risk of harm to the patient. So that we provide both theoretical information training as well as practical training. That training is currently actually being rolled out to the municipal police. We were supposed to start training with them last week. There was we did it with the Port of Spain Corporation already, and we were supposed to do some more last week, but there was a logistic problem and we had to reschedule it. But that is ongoing with the municipal police. Okay, and doing it through the municipalities, again, we'll be doing it through all 14 municipalities. Absolutely. Right, and THA also will be included, Tobago. As long as they are willing to participate, we are more than willing to roll it out to Tobago as well. Okay. Madam Chair, could I go to our next question? Madam Chair?
Yes, please, Member Ford.
Right. Again, we are going back to the WHO AIMS report 2018 to 2019, where it was indicated, and I quote, medications remain available in all classes for the entire population in the public mental health services. again, on page 9. And my question is, given that these findings pertain to the 2018-2019 report, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the availability of medication for persons within the mental health fraternity?
And if I could just jump in right there, because I have a question on that as well. Could you just, in your answer, clarify whether the mental health drugs are available free of charge through the CDAP program? So as you address all of that, just could you just put that in there, thanks?
Okay. Mental health drugs are available across, free of charge. Not all of them are on the CDAP list, as you would know that is a very limited list with a few drugs for each type of illness. So there are some mental health drugs on that list, but they are, even if a drug is not on CDAP, you can access it from the hospital pharmacy or the health center pharmacy once it's prescribed for you by your psychiatrist or your doctor working in a psychiatric clinic across Trinidad and Tobago. And we have drugs from all the major classes: antidepressants, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, anti-epileptics, the whole range. Drugs to prevent side effects of other drugs, we have them, right? So we do have a wide range of drugs. In terms of the impact of the pandemic, I would have to defer to Ms. Lewis or Professor Hutchinson, who are on the delivery side of things, in terms of whether they've been having any difficulties that are specific to the pandemic.
Okay. Ms. Lewis or Professor Hutchinson? Who wants to take that one? Okay, Ms. Lewis.
I don't know if Dr. Shafi is on. Perhaps he might be better suited as medical director to.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to answer to that question. In terms of the supply of medication, the same effect of the pandemic in terms of supplies. So we had limited effect with supply of medication, but that has not impacted severely on the delivery of services to patients. So we've been able to maintain the supply of the range of medication that are needed to treat with many of the conditions that we manage within the Northwest Regional Health Authority. And so I won't say that has impacted severely on us on providing medication for the patients.
Number 4?
Yeah, okay, I'm good, Madam Chair. I'm good.
Okay. If I may just slip in a question here before anybody else comes in. My question has to deal with success and the success factors. What do we count as success in mental health care? We have the policy, we have the procedures, and we have the decentralization going on. What is it that what goals are we striving to meet in terms of the provision of mental health care to our citizens? And are we meeting those goals?
Madam Chair, let me answer that question. So when we look at the success, we also look at the reason why we are managing individuals with mental illness. So they present to us with symptoms, what mental health symptoms. And as a result of the mental health symptoms, there's impairment in functioning. So in terms of when we then look at success or failure, is that being able to provide some level of recovery to the functioning of the patient. And when we talk about functioning, being able to either go back out to work, being able to go back out to school, being able to maintain relationship, being able to maybe start back working if they've lost their job, in terms of attendance at work and reliability if they are employed in any area. Those are the kind of measures we look at in terms of success. And also for those who need rehabilitation, those are also the measures we look at if they go through the rehabilitative process. Ability to function in the society is our goal.
And with respect to how we are able to achieve that goal. Would you say, Dr. Shafi, you are intimately involved, are we achieving that goal for the majority of the patients that present to the mental health institutions around the country? Are there particular concerns about particular classes of persons that may present more challenges, or are there any trends or patterns we are seeing now that we need to be aware of as citizens that present a particular challenge to the provision of mental health care in Trinidad and Tobago now?
Okay, so Madam Chair, the answer to that is that the range of mental disorders that we manage are very wide. And so what will impact or being able to achieve those goals will depend on the severity of your symptoms and the type of mental disorder that you suffer from. And the trend that we know, coming to us, those of us who practice on the ground, those that present with disorders that are less severe, like depression, anxiety, we're more able to get them to achieve those goals as compared to individuals who present with things like schizophrenia. And when I talk about schizophrenia, you can also have different severities. You can have mild, moderate, and very severe presentation in terms of symptoms. So individuals with mild, moderate severity of symptoms in schizophrenia can also easily be engaged, and they can also improve and function within the society. It's the very, very severe cases of schizophrenia that tend not to do too well based on our interaction with these patients.
So you would say then that based on the treatment being offered, the decentralization that the ministry has been implementing along the way and so on, you would say that the patients that come to be treated are able, for the most part, to gain normal function, except for those who are severely challenged.
Correct, Madam Chair. And so many of our patients, especially the one I categorize as maybe depression, anxiety, even bipolar mood disorder, are able to maintain their job once the other things are in place in terms of compliance with treatment, compliance with therapy, being psychotherapy, occupational therapy, they're able to maintain their job. And also, social support is very, very important. Family support is very, very important, especially if we are talking about individuals being able to comply with treatment that is being provided, more so in the outpatient clinics and in different clinics all over Trinidad.
I see Senator Thompson. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, I wish to find out, I don't know who could answer, if the ministry is satisfied with the extent of its outreach programs for public education and awareness of the nature of mental illness, the treatment for mental illness, so that the public can differentiate between what is mental illness, to understand it is an illness, it is not a spirit lash or obia. How do they recognize the signs and symptoms so that you could eliminate discrimination against children? Because I remember doing training with Dr. Shafi. We were doing a joint workshop, and I was horrified to learn that a lot of the children we have in our institutions sent there by the court are children with mental illnesses. So children are subjected, because people are not aware of the presenting symptoms, to bullying, to abuse and neglect. So parents may be beating children at home, and saying this child can't behave, not being aware that this child has an illness. So how do we target? How do we roll out a program? Is sufficient being done so that everybody is aware of the, what is happening with a particular child? Because people who should be, we expect to be more intelligent, even lawyers. I heard a lawyer speak in disparaging terms about a colleague who has a problem. We've had lawyers committing suicides. So across the spectrum, even doctors, so even in a professional institution, is there a component or a module where you can educate different professionals, whether they're in teaching or different professions, about how mental illness is presenting, and also parenting programs. Anybody?
Thank you for that question, Senator. And I would like to assure you and your colleagues that the process of public education is an ongoing process. I don't think there will ever be a time when we're satisfied that we don't need to do that anymore. That is something we will always need to be doing. Ms. Lewis, to talk a bit about the outreach unit at the Sundance Hospital, which has been doing a lot of work. They actually have a drama club, which unfortunately, due to the pandemic, hasn't been able to do some of the types of things that they did. But previously, they would go out, for instance, on World Mental Health Day on Brian Lara Promenade and do skits and plays to highlight different mental health topics. So, even the creative arts is utilized so that you can present the information in a way that people find it easily to receive. At the level of the ministry, we do what we can. We do engage in some public education programs. At the individual level, several doctors in their personal capacity engage in a lot of that kind of activity. The Association of Psychiatrists of Trinidad and Tobago has done quite a bit of that. Up to last night, I did a presentation at a meeting to talk a bit about, and it was a topical issue to talk about, mental health and the pandemic and its effect on mental health. So public education is ongoing. It is important. It is a priority. And it is something that will never cease to be a priority. No matter how much we've done, we will always need to do more. So I turn over to Ms. Lewis to talk about the outreach unit at the Northwest RHA.
Yes, thank you. So we have developed over the past 2 years a mental health outreach team. We do various mental health promotional sensitization for various organizations and ministries, including BPTT, Amplia, airports authorities, the Defense Force we've worked with. So we have a pool of persons that would go through how to recognize signs and symptoms, how to recognize how the stress presents, coping mechanisms, and how and where to access help. I must say we have found that organizations and persons are reaching out more than they perhaps were doing 5 years ago for mental health support for their staff. We also do various presentations at churches, etc. But we do have a team, and I invite you or the listening public. Our email address is mental.healthservices@nwrha.gov.tt, and we will respond to any requests for any mental health promotional activity. We have on our team 2 art therapists, a music therapist within our psychology department. So there are various, professionals that can be engaged in how we present material.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure all of the members of Parliament are noting this because it is something that we also would like to present for our constituents. Senator Thompson, is there anything else you'd like to add at this time?
No, ma'am.
All right. Let me jump in with a question here about the infrastructural needs of the mental health facilities. And that was part of the submission to the committee. And what I want to ask is, how severely are the infrastructural requirements that are yet to be completed, how severely are these affecting the ability of the different institutions to offer access to quality mental health care? Not sure who wants to take that one. Yes, with the overarching view, do you want to give us some insight into that?
We know that there are challenges with the infrastructure at some of our facilities. However, the ministry and the RHA's do have ongoing works at all of the facilities that need infrastructural rehabilitation. And I believe the different representatives from the RHs can expand on the works that are being done at their institutions.
Yeah, feel free.
Yeah, if I may, it only seems right. We start with Sundance Hospital.
Yes.
The institution is over 100 years old. There are continuing works that are being done, and the nature of the patients here as well means that works are continuously ongoing, because you might fix something this morning and then you have to go back and fix it this evening. But we do have roof works ongoing. We do have repair work going on with regards to our forensic unit. We have ongoing works at the Arima Rehabilitation Center.
But if you could, sorry to interject, but what I'm trying to focus on is are the challenges that you're facing, are they impacting your ability to deliver care? Are they impacting your ability to, your capacity to deal with the patients that require being hospitalized? That's what I really want to focus on, not necessarily exactly what is happening, but how is it affecting your ability to deliver and to your capacity as well?
It isn't affecting in a negative way. When we have repair works to be done to a ward, for example, we relocate and works are done. So there is usually a lot of internal movement going on. But we get it done internally. So it doesn't affect, for example, the number of beds available for admission.
So is any of this work meant to increase your capacity?
No. In keeping with the decentralization model, we want to reduce admission and increase discharge. Sundance Hospital currently has a bed capacity of 725 beds, which are usually almost always filled. So it's not to increase bed capacity at the psychiatric hospital.
Okay. If we can get a response from the others who are represented here.
So, good morning again. At the North Central Regional Health Authority, the psychiatric services are located in the General Hospital, which is at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex, so that the infrastructural issues are related to those that pertain to the entire hospital. Because of that, and because in some sense we're limited by the space that is available within the hospital, the psychiatric unit at the Arima Hospital was commissioned as part of the new Arima Hospital. But because of COVID and it being a COVID hospital, we have not been able to utilize that space to expand the services that we could deliver to the population who live within the catchment of the NCRHA. So once that becomes possible, that capacity will increase, and we'll be better able to serve particularly the environs of Arima, and where we do have a large sector that requires mental health support and treatment.
That's what could be the services for not just mental health, but in terms of other health services. Anyone else wants to weigh in here from their different perspectives?
Madam Chair, in the Eastern region, our mental health services are basically outpatient services being provided by the Sector 3B of Sundance Hospital. The challenge is for the physical space. We have to share the same space where we have the regular health center clinics going on. And in the same area, we need to have the mental health clinics on these specific days as well. And especially with the COVID-19, we have the guidelines to maintain the physical distance and certain guidelines to follow. So the physical space to accommodate these mental health clinics while the health center clinical services are going on is a challenge in the Eastern region.
Dr. Ramota, I see you wanted to contribute as well.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. So yes, at Southwest RHA, the outpatient facilities the challenge is getting space, and because of the ministry's thrust to have more community-based psychiatric services to deliver, we are recommending that we create what we call mental health. We call behavioral and wellness centers, which would be basically centers operating 5 days a week that could provide, adult psychiatric services as well as the pediatric and the developmental clinics that we have to deliver to the outpatients. So we are having a current infrastructure upgrade of the inpatient ward, but the aim is, again, not to increase capacity. We are currently as well aiming to have the facilities at the New Horizon and the Cuba ECC, brought up to standard so that in case there is an emergency at the San Fernando Psychiatric Facility, we can have a decanting center where we can hold some of our inpatients. The ECCs are also in need of infrastructural upgrade, but we are within capacity there. The main challenge is really finding outpatient space because we have to serve a wide geography, so we need to go out and have clinics. And as the Eastern region has rightly said, we compete for the primary care at the primary care centers, and the space, physical distancing, etc., that is required is inadequate.
Thank you very much. I saw the hand of Member Ford and then Member John.
Right. Before I go to my question, my direct question, what I want to come in on, Madam Chair, just a little feedback on some of the comments made by the various RHAs and so on. Right. And with all of them, we are hearing about the use for space, right? The logistics of space and so on. But what I did not hear coming out of it in the constituency of Tunapuna, where we have two health centers, and I know specifically for the one on the Tacrigo Health Center on El Dorado Road, where they have designated different days for different services, right? I did not hear that coming out, right? To say that on Monday is psychiatric, on Tuesdays pediatrics, on Wednesdays children, or whatever. I think they even have the designated days for where they give out vaccines also at these different centers. So again, rather than to hear back from each one of them, if probably, whether through Dr. Otello or from the PS, if it is that there are designated days for designated health services at these various outlets throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Thanks for feedback.
I can answer that. And thanks for your question. The answer is that right now we have a bit of a mixed bag. Traditionally, that's how mental health services were provided in health centers, where on a given day, the mental health team would come in, they would do the clinic, and they would leave. Over the years, we realized that that was not adequate. And at the level of the Northwest, they began the process of transitioning to a different type of service. So within the Northwest RHA, they now have standalone community health and wellness centers where from Monday to Friday during normal working hours, there is always a mental health presence. There are days when there are clinics, but there are days when there are other activities, and they are able to use that space now to do health promotion activities, to have the various types of therapists in office on different days, so that different services can be provided. And that is what we're moving towards when we talk about the decentralization. we're moving towards a scenario where that kind of service will be available at various locations across Trinidad and Tobago, so that you will not be limited to 1 day a week when a psychiatrist leaves a hospital somewhere and comes to your community. There will be a community mental health team that works in your community that is comprised of psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, creative art therapists, occupational therapists, nurses, attendants, clerical and administrative staff, the entire team. So that over time, we want to have 5 days a week, 8 to 4 type availability of mental health services across Trinidad and Tobago. And what we also want to add on top of that is an emergency response component. In other words, a 24-hour-a-day ability to respond to crisis situations, which would require, on-call arrangements and so on. So those things are being planned. They're not there yet, but they're being planned because we understand the need. If we're able to do all of that, we will not need to increase capacity for inpatient services, because we will be able to do a lot more on an outpatient basis and reduce the need for people to be admitted to hospital.
And again, Dr. Otello, hence the reason why I asked, because that is information that is pertinent to our listening public today. Right, I would like to go through you, Chairman, again to Dr. Ramuta. And it's a question with regards to the 5 behavioral health and wellness centers at the SWRHA. These 5 locations are presently available. I'd like to know if it is that they are presently in action, and if we can identify where they are located, or if it's something to come, something in the future that is to come forward.
No, that is our recommendation for the future. We have currently, we do have outpatient clinics functioning at several of the health centers, Sanford, Princestown, Siparia, Cuba, Barrackpore, Gasparillo, Point Fortin, Cedrus. And all of these centers, they have their days when the psychiatrists will go and conduct those clinics. It's similar to what Dr. Otello was saying, that just going out and having a clinic on 1 day is insufficient to meet the needs, and that if we establish these centers, we can have a bigger presence in the community and deal with the patients in the community, and hence obviate the need for having a bigger inpatient facility.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member Ford. We now have Member John.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. I just want to make the point, and I think the Dr. Otello kind of alluded to it with respect to this the vision of a community health team. And what the point I want to make is that there's a fierce urgency of now, Madam Chairman, because particularly with the pandemic, this has elevated the need. I think Ms. Lewis said that they are getting more folks are calling in, the requesting service. But in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a kind of stigma attached to people saying they're overwhelmed and stressed. And basically, we have to find a way to destigmatize this, the need for support for mental health, because everybody mature, but you're seeing children who are very vibrant now, they have become very quiet, and similarly, women or even men who have lost their work, or women who face in the supermarket. We have real problems now coming out of this pandemic. So, I think our team probably has to be more active in articulating what is available, and not only have these discussions within closed door and a little team here and a little team there on demand, but to bring it out into the open, the same way in response to the question previously posed, where the response was this community mental health team, where within the community, they will set up all of these various professionals. I think it will become normal. It will become normal within the various communities just to have access to the services and to go and say, I'm not feeling so well and it's in my head.
Well said, Member John. That issue of the stigma and the public education is I think, I see Dr. Otello nodding because it's a serious matter. I think maybe cultural. I think we are coming away from it slowly, but I don't, there's always, as Dr. Otello would have said, a role for more exposure, more education to ensure that people utilize the services that are available, and that would help them, right? We have Senator Thompson-Ahi.
Madam Chair, I must say that I think Dr. Otello came here this morning armed and well prepared. And I must compliment her for how she has handled this inquiry. Because before she spoke, my next question was to ask her about an emergency response team to de-escalate explosive situations. And it seems that is coming on stream. So I thank her for that, because there have been too many instances of police coming on the scene, supposedly to de-escalate a situation, and it has ended up with people being killed because, of course, the police don't know to shoot at hands and feet, but too many fatal injuries. So I would just like to thank her for enlightening us about that. And I would want to take this opportunity, even though it may not be appropriate, to thank this lady who writes in the newspaper, Ravello, because she has certainly opened up the question of mental illness and people's understanding of it. So that I hope that what will happen is that this team will be able to function very quickly and effectively and efficiently to assist, because there are many instances where you need that help. I remember way back when an excellent common entrance teacher in a prestigious boys' school in Port of Spain used to trip off. And once there was a situation where he was attempting to throw a boy through the second floor window, and I mean, this is an excellent teacher otherwise, but there have been cases where, things didn't go too right. And there are other cases where things, you need to help people or provide the required assistance for persons with mental illness. So it seems that we are getting somewhere. I go back to the earlier inquiry where she spoke about the police and the work that is being done in training the police. And I hope that she took up my suggestion that in every station, you have someone who will be equipped to deal with a situation such as occurs, involving a member of the public who is putting other members of the family at risk or members of the community. Because really and truly, we are about saving, and building a society where people feel safe. The agencies as well, including the mental health personnel. So thank you for the work that you do to assist persons in the community to, recover from their problems and also to keep us safe, the other people safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Thompson-Ahi. Before Minister Maurice Julian comes in, I just want to ask a question regarding the Mental Health Act and the amendments to that act. And I want to ask, what would be the impact of the amendments that are suggested? And in light of the fact that those amendments have not been enacted just yet, is it a view of the Ministry of Health that this is in any way impacting the human rights of persons with mental health challenges? And when do we expect to see that act brought before the Parliament with the amendments that are required?
Okay, with regard to the amendments that needs to be made to the Act, I do not believe that they are in any significant way contributing to people's rights being violated, but they provide mechanisms that would assist us to do things better and have a legal basis for doing those things better. In other words, we already recognize patients' rights. We already talk to them, for instance, about informed consent and things like that. But what we're doing is through legislation, making it mandatory so that it makes it easier from the point of view of training and mentoring junior staff to say, look, this is a legal standard that you have to adhere to, as opposed to it just being a principle. So that we're working towards that. We unfortunately don't have a delivery date available for you at this point in time because of the steps that have to be followed that have not yet all of them been done. But it is very, very high on our priority list because we understand the importance of it. There are some issues that, for instance, the issue of persons who do not, after discharge from hospital, willingly comply with outpatient care, and by so doing are prone to relapse, and when unwell can become violent. Those kinds of situations are being looked at in the amendments to the Act so that we can have a legal provision that puts in place a process for supervision of those persons when they're outside of hospital, so that they begin to understand their responsibility in regard to taking care of themselves and the impact of that failure to live up to that responsibility on others. And they are aware that there are guardrails. In other words, do what's required of you. These are the possible consequences. So that we are very, very mindful of the urgency, and we are working to get it moved forward as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Member Maurice Julien.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you to Dr. Otello, I have a question from the public, which actually it's close to home. I had a mentally ill relative who came off his medication and literally walked into a truck where he died. And the question from the public is, what is the prevalence of outpatients coming off their medication before the prescribed time and relapsing? And I also have a follow-up.
Understand that you are ill and appreciate your need for treatment. And although we do a lot of work as mental health care providers to help to build that insight, it can sometimes be quite difficult. So that, unfortunately, it is quite frequent that patients with those types of disorders may come off their medication. There are, however, available tools for treating with that. For instance, for persons who are known to not be willing to take oral medication tablets, we now have medication available in an injectable form that can last as long as a month in their bloodstream, so that once they get that monthly injection, they're more than likely to remain well and to not be at risk of that kind of outcome. With regard to availability of medication, sometimes an individual drug may not be available, but more often than not, there are other drugs in that class of drugs that can be relied on to care for that person. So that usually when a particular drug is not in the system, practitioners tend to switch the person to something else. So I can't speak to what happened in that specific situation, but usually the person would be switched to another drug that can benefit them during that particular period until the one that they preferred or that is preferred for them is back within the system. So we continue to work towards ensuring that the supply chain is intact so that patients receive their medication regularly and in a timely manner, because we understand the impact of deliberate refusal to comply or to continue with medication. But we also understand that that refusal is often a part of the illness in itself. So we don't judge those persons. We do our best to take care of them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Otello. But of course, you will note my concerns because it's really sad when something as simple as a pill could help, and the lack of access or the inability to understand the importance of taking the pill. It really is it is quite traumatic. Thank you very much.
I see hands from Member Ford, Member Thompson-Ahi, and we are going to try to wrap up in a little bit. So let me take, I'm going to take ladies first. So I'm going to take Senator Ahi and then Member Ford, and then I will give one last question. And of course, Member Ford is a pure gentleman, so he will give way. And then,
just keep it in mind that Senator Ahi don't take up the whole period.
Certainly not. And then we'll wrap up with a question from me, and I think that will be the end of our session today. So, Senator Thompson-Ahi.
My question is very short, and Dr. Othello, tell me, and any of the doctors there, tell me, is there a problem of confidentiality in your profession that hampers people from getting help, frankly speaking?
I can say that the Ministry of Health has a policy with respect to confidentiality of documents and of patients' information, and that information, that policy is widely known among members of staff, so that while we cannot speak to outlying situations as a general rule, confidentiality is, the importance of it is known, and people are encouraged to adhere to that policy. No patient information should be released to the public without the proper process. If a patient themselves wants a medical report stating their patient information, they have to go through a process of requesting it in writing and signing written informed consent so that that information can be disclosed. If a patient wants a copy of their medical records, they go through the same process. If someone else wants a copy of a patient's records, that is not allowed except in certain situations, such as when the court asks for records as part of a legal proceeding. So we do not in any trivial way disclose patient information, and we really want the public to understand that, because we do not want fear of a breach of confidentiality to be a barrier to care.
You had complaints?
I am not currently in the service delivery arm, so I cannot say that I have recently heard of complaints. So I would have to defer that to persons who are functioning on the ground at this point in time in terms of whether or not there have been recent incidents of such breaches.
I see Dr. Shafe wants to come in.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of patient data, in the past, there may have been issues with individuals' information being passed to family members without their knowledge. But what has happened in the past 3 years or thereabout with Northwest Regional Health Authority, for you to get any information about any patient currently, you have to go through the legal department of NWRHA. So we put in that requirement so that the legal department will then do the screening process and determine who you are, who is trying to obtain information about any particular patient from Northwest Regional Health Authority relating to their data and diagnosis and treatment. So that's the current approach in Northwest.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's have now Member Ford.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much, Senator Thompson. The Children's Evaluation and Treatment Unit, CETU, which is based at the Sundance Hospital, is it in operation? Madam PS, to one of your colleagues there.
Thank you, Member. Dr. Shafi should be able to respond to that question.
Yes, Madam Chair, the CTU is operational. We have 4 beds for males and 4 beds for female. And the purpose of establishing the unit in 2019 was to facilitate the judiciary in terms of assessment and providing reports on time for children that need assessment and report, so that the court can then make determination as to what to do or going forward.
Any collaboration?
Yes, we do. We do collaborate with Children's Authority. We collaborate with the courts as well. The Children's Court, the Family Court. We collaborate with different agencies.
Right. And in terms of mechanism to ensure no abuse of the children, they are well taken care of, because remember, they are minors, so all those things, systems and parameters, I believe, are in place.
Okay, we have different policies that govern most of the engagement that patients have with staff in Sundance Hospital, be it treatment, be it if we think that the patient is suicidal, if we think that maybe there are issues with family members. So those policies, let's say, for instance, the suicide policy requires that a child that is suicidal, therefore, we get a one-to-one nursing. So within the unit, you have 8 beds. So there are instances where we actually have more staff than patients, just to ensure that we give them the optimum care and protection. I know in the past we talk about restraints and physical. We don't do physical restraints on the ward because of the intensity of the support and service that we provide in CTU. So
right, last question, Madam Chair, on the same topic. Out of these 8 beds, I know at varied time it may vary, but is it saying that some orphans or they still have parents? How is the ratio in terms of the probability and going forward? Is it that parents they have parents or they are orphans? Just give us a little synopsis.
Okay, let me just come back a little bit again. I know the purpose was for assessment and evaluation, but we are also limited in terms of we cannot admit children to adult wards. So there are instances where family members will come in with their children who have mental health problems, and we admit them to CTU without coming through the courts. But most of the patients come through the courts. They come through the judiciary, most of the patients that we see. And most of them are also via the Children's Authority, who approach the judiciary, and then they are sent to the CTU.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And the last question comes from me, and I just want to quickly know if someone is dissatisfied with the level of care that their family member is receiving, or even the patient themselves, what are the options for making complaints and getting redress? This is an important part of your rights, being able to say, I'm not satisfied, and getting some manner of redress. What are the provisions in place for that?
I will ask perhaps Ms. Lewis to talk about the role of the quality department.
Yes, so the quality department would normally do service user feedback, but at all our outpatient units, our assessment department and admission wards, we also have suggestion boxes, so that they would routinely look at the feedback from the suggestion boxes. But family members, patients are more than welcome to talk to any of the quality officers who are based at the hospital. And they do that.
What is the process by which, just for the education of those who may be looking, what's the process by which they can actually get in touch with the quality division or department?
You just contact the hospital, you call the hospital at 624-1151, and you ask for the quality department.
All right, I don't see any other hands, and I think we have exercised the officials from the Dr. Shafi. You want to say something? Sorry.
Yes, Madam Chair. Just to let you know, there are also patients and relatives who call directly the Office of the Medical Director to complain, and we do address their issues. Also, the Office of the General Manager, Mental Health Services, to complain, and we do address their issues. And sometimes even some of these complaints come from Ministry of Health, and we take each one case by case.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Dr. Shafi, for that. And Minister Cox, you wanted to raise something?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to find out, because normally when there's a situation that you have a form of redress. Most of the time, this is not advertised. So sometimes persons may be calling all around trying to figure out where should I go. And I think that is one area that needs to be addressed, where persons would know that, okay, you have a form of redress. If there's a situation that you don't agree with, where you can go. Have this been happening?
I think Minister Cox is speaking to the measures that we just spoke to that are in place. Is it generally known by the public, and can they really follow a set procedure to lodge their complaint?
Yes, Madam Chair. Do you advertise this information? Is that information put out to the public that they know that they can come to you if they have issues?
Madam Chair, I can speak for the Chair, that yes, we do advertise it, and it's also, we also have the numbers to contact for mental health support, as well as the complaints to the Equality Authority on our webpage at the Southwest, and it is advertised. Yes.
Okay. Ms. Lewis?
So it's the same for the Northwest. Lots of people also use the mechanism through our social media pages, but it is advertised on our website. And once you are admitted to the hospital, you are informed of the procedure, as well as the outpatient clinics.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
In the Eastern region, similar to the other regions, we have this quality department, and their numbers and all those things are advertised. But in addition to that, in all our clinics, most of the clinics, we have customer service representatives who command the quality department. They are placed in most of the clinics, and they will make their presence known by addressing the clients before the start of the clinic, who they are, what is their purpose, what they do. And the clients can, if they have any concerns, they can approach them. They're easily available. And we also have the client feedback forms that are readily available at all the health centers. So once the customer service representatives realize that there is a concern, they will give the form to the client, and they can make a complaint anonymously and put it in the box. And our quality department will go through all these complaints, and they address the issues. And they have a specific time period within which they have to get back in contact with the person who made the complaint. So there are systems in place.
So at this time, I would really like to thank the members of the committee, as well as our officials from the Ministry of Health, who have given us a lot of information, and I'm going to do just a quick summary after. But before I do that, I'd like to invite the Deputy Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Health to make brief closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'd also like to thank the members of the committee and my colleagues and from the RHAs. We appreciate this forum for the discussion that has taken place, for your questions and feedback. And rest assured that our team at the Ministry of Health will review any recommendations that were made by the committee towards promoting greater treatment and care for mental health care services. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. And I'd like to just summarize what we've discussed, despite a bit. So I'm going to go as quickly as I can. The National Mental Health Policy 2019 to 29 did take into consideration the international and regional mental health care policies and procedures, and guidance from PAHO is sought on these matters. Where we have internal audits, they are done by the RHA's quality departments. However, no external audits are done at this time, even though there is international best practice that shows that it can be done, and it would be a good thing for our Ministry of Health to engage in an external audit of our mental health care procedures and policies. Feedback from relatives and caregivers as well as the patients can be obtained and is routinely obtained by the institutions. And some of these concerns include prescription renewal, etc. And this can be formalized. Persons who are dissatisfied with level of care or have concerns can use the suggestion boxes that are provided at the institutions or client feedback forms, or they can get in touch with the quality departments. The medical directors and general managers have also received complaints, and they do pass them along to be addressed. The WHO has identified the lack of a national mental health report as a shortcoming. This is being worked on and addressed through the creation of a national mental health information system, which will allow the ministry to collect and analyze data. We don't have a completion date for that project, but the ministry is progressing and has this as one of their priorities. The majority of mental health patients are outpatients, and inpatient care is reserved where there's a critical need for where there's severe symptoms or medical compliance is really critical. Where care is provided for children and adults across all of the RHAs, parents are also involved, where there are children being treated and they are part of the treatment process. And the geography where patients are treated really depends on where they present themselves, because the ministry is embarking on a decentralization drive, has embarked, and is continuing to provide these services into all the rural areas to increase the access to mental health care. In terms of our clinical procedures of dealing with mental care challenges, we have our doctors that have postgrad degrees in psychiatry, and they are supplied to our institutions. And so they, through continuous professional development, ensure that they are up to date on the treatment that is given to our citizens. In pre-COVID times, there were annual conferences that would have assisted in ensuring that we are up to date in terms of the care we provide to our citizens. Concerns have been raised about the availability of mental health services. And again, the emphasis is on decentralization, and where there are not established clinics or health centers, there are the outpatient or outreach clinics, I should say, that are operating. All right? In terms of the heads of the Ministry of Health being trained, specifically trained with respect to the international instruments and conventions, there's no specific training. However, these are constantly referred to when policies and procedures are put in place to ensure that we are referencing these instruments and we are in line with what we are supposed to be signatories to. The Ministry of Health has guidelines for the provision of mental health care for approved homes. That is now in transition. It's being finalized and perfected for legislation to be enacted. And that is a critical part of allowing the regulatory role of the Ministry of Health to be fully enforced where it speaks to the provision of healthcare in the private homes especially. At this point, however, the Ministry of Health does provide informal guidance at these institutions, both private and public, to allow for proper management and procedures of persons with mental health challenges. There is a need for training with the Defense Force, the police service, on de-escalating situations involving mental health patients, and that is imminent. There has been some training, and that should be ongoing with our Defense Force. There is a view that this type of skill should be resident in every police station to avoid situations where mentally challenged persons have been dealt with and there have been maybe sometimes death is the result of it. So that is important to increase the effectiveness of our Defense Force in dealing with persons with mental health challenges in the communities. In terms of drugs for mental health care, these are available free of charge, whether it is CDAP or through the hospital health center pharmacies. And whereas COVID-19 did not affect significantly the supply, they are available for patients. Our our success in mental health care speaks to the level of recovery for the patient. And that's how the mental health institutions mark their success, whether they're able to take the clients and allow them to resume their normal functions. And that is the emphasis. And the Ministry of Health has noted success in terms of the treatment of majority of patients that come to the clinics, especially where you have the outpatient clinics. The Ministry of Health has an important role to play in public education with respect to mental health and mental illness. And this is very important, especially in cases of parents dealing with young children who may not understand what they are dealing with in terms of the behaviors of their children. Though there is ongoing education and exposure, that's never enough. And the Ministry of Health has engaged different ways of treating with this, involving drama, creative arts, trying to involve the young people in this. And they continue this because it is important in this time of pandemic to remove the stigma that is attached to mental health care and to expose the availability of care for all of our citizens so that there is a need in another way to normalize mental health care in our society. Institutions that are offering mental health care, these require infrastructural upgrades, that is acknowledged. However, the upgrades are meant to deal more with the quality of services and the breadth of services required instead of capacity, because the ministry is really focusing on decentralizing these services. So where these infrastructural works are ongoing, they are dealing with really the effectiveness of the care, not so much the capacity. And these works continue. What has been noted, however, is that the COVID-19 protocols, they have affected in some way the ability to provide care because of the social distancing, etc. It's really a competition for space in some cases. So that's one of the challenges that the Ministry of Health has to deal with. In terms of the amendments we made to the Mental Health Act, these are necessary for increasing the efficiency of services. However, the Act as it stands is now addressing all mental health rights of persons with mental health challenges. And so though a delivery date for that legislation is not given, the ministry has this as one of its greatest priorities. In cases where patients come off their medication, that is a challenge for the Ministry of Health. And some mitigation has been seen by using the injections, which give a longer period of protection or of effect. But that is something that the ministry has had to deal with. And what is important in these cases is the social support. Another issue that comes up is the availability of the drugs. Because some patients may not be necessarily voluntarily coming off the medication, but where the drugs are not available, that presents a challenge. So it is noted and a concern that the ministry continue to use drugs that are readily available so that patients would not have to be without medication, which may lead to disastrous effects. In terms of confidentiality, the ministry has a strict policy, which is well publicized to all staff members. And the ministry does encourage adherence to that policy because it is important to build confidence in the treatment. And we know that if persons believe that their personal information is out there, it will be a barrier to seeking care. In the past 3 years, in some cases, the legal department has been involved in ensuring that persons requesting information on patients are actually valid family members and are authorized to do so. So all of that describes that what we have discussed today as we are focusing on the human rights of persons with mental health challenges, our ability as a country to offer them quality mental health care and the possibility of any discrimination meted out to these persons. So I want to thank our officials who really contributed with frankness and with a breath of completion, especially Dr. Othello. I think we called upon you a lot today, Dr. Othello. Thank you very much. And to all of the members who would have contributed to us having such a rich and productive discussion. Thank you to members of our listening and viewing public who would have submitted their questions. And thank you so much for to the Secretariat of the Parliament, who ensures that we have all things in place for these most important hearings to take place. I want to wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day. And above all, I advocate to everyone, please do stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.